Tattooing on practice skin is absolutely one of the most efficient way to learn your technique of tattooing. Now, even though it doesn't resemble real skin as much as it should, because it's not really taking care of the healing process and all that, it does give a good practice, and especially in holding your machine and working with your machine and get everything in order. Now, this is also the case for me. I have been doing a lot of more like traditional sort of designs, and I want to evolve my tattoo skill in black and gray and leaning towards realism. Now, a long time ago, we did this thing called The Journey, where we actually started off this project, but it wasn't really thought through from my part of the story. So we're gonna do this thing all over again. We're gonna do a nice practice skin runs with stencils and everything. So if you actually like this content, make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment and subscribe to the channel, because this is going to be something where we're going to be learning together. So make sure, if you have a design that you want me to try or to do, or if you maybe have any tips or tricks for me, make sure to let them know in the comments. So before we move on, we should probably check what we actually need for this video, and I'm going to show you how to put your stencil perfectly on practice skin. A tattoo machine, stencil solution, grip tape, black ink, stencil paper, a stencil printer if you have one, obviously practice skin, Vaseline, ink cups, needles. I'm using the 9 Magnum and a 3 round liner. You need some gloves and some paper towel. I'm going to use my Elite stencil printer for this one because it's very nice. You can actually print directly from Procreate to this printer, which is a very cool feature. Here you can see I drew up a stencil. I made 3 sizes and I can export them directly to the stencil app from Elite, which is absolutely perfect for me. Just hit the print button and it'll shoot straight out. Now that we have our stencil, let's actually put some gloves on so we can get ready for some action. So now that we got our gloves on and our practice skin ready, we want to determine what spot we're gonna place the stencil on. We're gonna use our stencil solution we got from Fomimo. Just put a little drop in the corner there where I'm gonna place my stencil, and make sure you rub that in very well and spread everything out equally. You don't wanna have big parts or big chunks of solution where your stencil is gonna be. I would recommend to use a paper towel to actually press down onto the stencil, because if you have some stencil solution on your gloves, it can really smear that stencil. It already happens on real skin, on practice skin it's only worse. Now slowly peel it off and try not to move the stencil around too much, because it's gonna create a mess. And just like that, we got our stencil. To keep everything very basic, we're only gonna use 3 ink cups. One is gonna be full black, one is gonna be just half black, and the last cup is gonna be 3 drops. Fill the rest up with water and we're good to go. I'm gonna start off using 7 folds with a 4.2mm stroke, and I let my needle hang about there. We are going to do our first couple of lines, and I always like to go really slow and light, because it's the first couple of lines you want to get kind of a feel for what you are doing. And I noticed pretty quickly that I needed to up my voltage just a little bit. So I cranked it up a bit from 6.5 to 7.3 volts. And we're good to go again. Now, since I am outlining everything, I do want to sort of bloodline a little bit of the highlights and the details that I put into my stencil, because especially on practice skin, you lose that stencil very quickly. So in order not to lose everything, I do highlight the little bits of highlights and shades that I need to put in later. I did actually notice after a couple of lines that I was losing a little bit more of my stencil that I actually intended to. So I'm quickly just gonna line out everything and highlight all the highlights that I need for my shading later on. And I figured lining is pretty boring to watch, so let's move a little bit ahead so we don't get too boring out here. Quickly clean out everything that we've done off the practice skin, so we can actually move on to shading and get our 9 Magnum ready. And we are good to go for some more shading. I set my machine at 3.3mm stroke, and I'm gonna decrease my voltage all the way down to 6 volts. My needle pretty much into the tip because I want to be very careful and very soft with my shading. Now, after a couple of passes with the 3.3mm stroke, I actually decided a little bit later on that it was probably better to move on to the 3.7mm stroke, because I kept going over that same spot and I couldn't really get that ink where I wanted it to be. So I'm just going in really careful, trying to brush it in, but it was actually working against me. It was working a bit too soft, so I did decide to actually move over to 3.7mm stroke. Now, at the moment I am packing in everything that just needs to be solid black, because most of the parts that are in there are going to be solid black, except of course for the spots that we highlighted, which we are going to shade in a little bit. So now that we've got our solid black in, I am going to my 3-drop shading solution and kind of do a pendulum swing kind of motion. So I'm just slowly brushing over the same area, trying to hit it from a couple of different angles just to saturate that light shading in there, nice and solid. And this is what's going to create not really the highlight, but it's sort of like a highlight with a little shade in it. It's not a very bright white highlight, but it does need a little bit of shading. So I'm quickly brushing over this area. Now, what I would like to know from some of the experts that might be in the comment section, would you actually do this light shade first and then black, or do you do your black first and then starts to shade later on? I am trying to experiment a little bit with what works better for me. In the bottom part I did actually do the light part first, and for that particular part it was a bit easier. Here you can see me just touching up a little bit of these edges, because it is kind of tricky to hit that Magnum really close to the small 3-round liner lines, and it's not something I'm very comfortable with. And that's actually why I am doing this practice, to learn to work around these struggles a little bit. And instead of learning that on someone else's skin, I think it's better to learn that kind of stuff on practice skin. So with the corner of my Magnum, I'm working slowly around the little bit that needs to be highlighted, so I don't actually pass over it. Make sure I hit that part good before I start packing the rest solid black. Now that we have everything solid, I'm softly gonna pass over with my 3-drop shading solution again and just dim that little highlight just a little bit. So like I mentioned earlier, on this big really shaft of this chest piece, I did decide to start off with the lighter part rather than doing all the solid black, just because I thought it was easier to build up the shade like this sort of. And since when you are working on real skin, you don't want to do like solid black and then start shading on the edges a little bit. And soft shading in generally is a little bit softer, literally what it's called, and it doesn't cause too much trauma to the skin. So I figured it's maybe a good habit to learn to do this soft bit a bit first before the black actually. And what I usually like to do is do the black first to get my contrast, but maybe that's what I've been doing wrong a little bit lately. So if you are an expert in the comment section, let me know. What do? Do you build up from soft and then go dark and do your blacks, or do you like to get your black in first and then start to build off? Or does it maybe depend on the spot or the size of the surface that you're actually working on? Those are things I would love to hear from an expert, but I did think for this particular part this actually worked quite well. Now in this part right here, you can see that I am doing the black first. I am going around my highlights and just soft and slowly working my black around those little ridges and edges that are in there, and put my solid black right into the place where it should be. Here I am trying to get in really tight with my magnum, but at the end of the tattoo I will pass over one more time with my liner in order to get really tight onto that lines that we created before. So here you can see I'm going back in with my liner just to tighten up a little bit around those highlights and around those lines in order to get some nice sharp edges on this design. I am also patching up a couple of small lines a little bit later because I thought the line work was a little bit weak in some places, like here for example. So that's something that's really nice to do at the end of the tattoo. Just go back in and start to really fine-tune all the last things that you didn't see while you were doing your other things during the tattoo. So always at the end do a little bit of detailing. Now cleaning off practice skin is a little bit of a hazard, so I am rubbing in some Vaseline and then going over with some paper towel in order to clean it. Now I know some other people might also use baby oil or olive oil or something like that to clean off the practice skin, so that is also something I might work for in the future. And here it is, our final piece. Let me know what you think about it. So I really hope you enjoyed watching this episode of kind of the new season or the revamped version of the journey. I am planning to do a lot more of these kind of videos, but I do need your input a little bit on what I should do next. So please let me know in the comments, what should I tattoo next? Now make sure or keep in mind that this is not something I am very familiar with. So don't say, oh yeah, do a bear portrait, do a wolf, do something like this. I will do it probably a little bit later on, but first we need to get a little bit more basic kind of things done for the first couple of episodes, just to, you know, get me in a rhythm a little bit and start to understand, because I already learned a lot from doing this episode. And I actually hope you did too. So if you learned something, also let me know in the comments. Make sure you do subscribe to my channel and hit that bell so you don't miss out any new videos. For those of you that want to see the raw footage, so instead of this edited version that you probably just watched, but the full version of me doing the whole tattoo, make sure to let me know in the comments, because I can always post the full version of this video as well. Other than that, I don't have a whole lot more to say other than thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.